Hey, thank you so much for watching, listening. Thank you. We're continuing our new series about being disappointed with Jesus. And we talked last week, or whenever you listen to this, we talked about seasons, occasions, times when we might be disappointed with Jesus. And I recognize that we need to keep our faith and confidence, believe in the promises of God, and we want to think that everything's going to turn out all right. But sometimes Jesus doesn't meet our expectations. And you pray and something you prayed for doesn't happen, or it backfires, does the opposite. And then you and I, maybe, we struggle. I think it's important for us to think about that. And of course, I want you to subscribe to my channel, subscribe to this, because we have great content. You're like, you should have said that at the beginning. I know. I thought I'd jump in and then kind of interrupt and then to tell you to subscribe. But I want us to continue with this series on what happens when we're disappointed, not if, because I don't think if disappointment. I think there's a fair degree of certainty that we can and we will be disappointed with Jesus, because Jesus doesn't do everything we want in the way we want, in the timing that we want, because Jesus isn't our puppet at all. In fact, we have to recognize that Jesus is Lord, Jesus is sovereign, and he does things the way he wants to, in the timing that he wants to, and in the method that he wants to. And so this is the experience that Martha and Mary had with Jesus. We talked about last week, they had summoned Jesus. He was in a remote village somewhere far away, and they lived in Bethany, and they sent a message to Jesus and said, the one you love, that would be their brother Lazarus, is sick. And the idea is that they wanted Jesus to come and heal their brother so that he wouldn't die. Jesus gets the message and he talks to his disciples and purposefully waits. He delays his departure to go to Bethany on purpose. And in essence, he lets Lazarus die. And that's not, Martha and Mary, that's not what they had in mind. They wanted healing rather than their brother to die. And that's why they sent the message in the first place to Jesus. Please come and heal our brother, the one you love. So Jesus didn't do that. And I think it's very disturbing to these sisters. And they expressed their dissatisfaction and with Jesus in a different ways, and because they're different people. But appreciate that both Martha and Mary are dealing not only with the loss of their brother, so there's grief there, and it's very intense grief, but then they're also to add on to the layer that big struggle in and of itself, the fact that Jesus didn't show up. He's their friend and he's too late. And so they have grief, plus they're disappointed, maybe frustrated, angry, hurt, betrayed by Jesus. Why? And that's what we're going to look at with these sisters this week and next week as well, in the next episode. So when Jesus lands in Bethany, it says in verse 17, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. Lazarus isn't like kind of dead. Not like, you could do the paddles, clear and punch him back to life and do CPR and chest compression, Lazarus, that boat sailed. He was dead. He was, rigor mortis had set in. His body was beginning to decompose. 4 days dead in the tomb. So this isn't like, maybe. He's stone cold dead. And Jesus shows up. And it says in verse 18 that there were a lot of Jews who came from Jerusalem to comfort, because Jerusalem was pretty close, to comfort Mary and Martha in their loss, to grieve alongside of them and to be there as a support and to be present with them in this difficult experience. And so Martha, in verse 20, when she hears that Jesus is coming, she leaves. I really like this. She leaves her house. Remember that she's the quintessential hostess. She's the one that's all about cooking, cleaning, and properly hosting people. And you got a boatload of visitors in her house who have come to help her with grieving. But she leaves all of that because she has prioritized her relationship with Jesus, the one thing. Maybe she learned from Jesus' words about Mary that Mary had chosen the one thing, Jesus, as a higher priority than cooking, cleaning, and hostessing all the people in your house. So I like that Martha left all of that to go find Jesus, who was outside of the village, but in the vicinity. And when she meets Jesus, she says to him in verse 21, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know whatever you ask the Father, he will give you." And I really appreciate Martha's words. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." She had full confidence that Jesus could heal, 100%. If you were here, he wouldn't have died, because your presence is healing inherently. And I know you love him, you loved him. And if you'd come, I don't know what kept you from coming. I don't know why this was a delay. I don't know what was going on. All I know is if you had showed up in time, my brother would not have died. And I think that we can all think about times and occasions, experiences in our life where it feels like Jesus is too late. Like that boat sailed. There's a delay, and if you're delinquent on a bill, it means you haven't paid your bill. The deadline comes, you don't pay the bill, and you're delinquent. It's past time. And so in some ways, it's like Jesus delayed and was even delinquent in healing Lazarus. It's too late. But I really like that Martha's honest with Jesus, hey, if you'd been here. And then I like what she says, "I know that whatever you ask the Father, he will give you." And this is really fascinating. Jesus answers her and says, "Your brother will rise again." And she responds, "I know that in the last day, he will experience resurrection in the last day." She believed in the distant future resurrection. In the last day, everybody rises from the dead, all the believers. And that's what she's pointing to way down the road, in the last day. But Jesus, and I like what Jesus says, because he doesn't even answer or address the question of healing. He immediately puts into the water the idea of rising from the dead. And then he says, and this is fascinating, I think it's really blows Martha's mind. He says in verse 25, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, even though he dies, and everyone who believes in me, will never die." Do you believe this? And Jesus puts into her thinking the idea that Jesus is the resurrection. And I think she was like, we did healing, but this is a whole different ball of wax. This is a different game. This is a different scenario. Resurrection. And, maybe she was like, what are you talking about? I'm curious. I don't totally understand. And so you could tell, and she goes along with him. She says, "Yes, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, coming into the world." And I appreciate the conversation here, because it's very, very, it's kind of rational, kind of logical. It doesn't have a lot of emotional overtones to it. It's just a little bit cut and dry. And that's the conversation. Jesus talking with Martha, Martha talking with Jesus, back and forth. And Jesus puts into the conversation maybe some new ideas and thoughts, and not just for way down the road into eternity, but rather even now in this moment. And so I bring this to your attention because I think sometimes when we're disappointed with Jesus, it's possible we haven't considered that he might be doing something in a different way, in a new way, in different timing, a different method. And maybe Jesus has something beyond what we've asked for, or beyond what we've anticipated, expected, hoped for, or something brand new. Is that possible? Because that's exactly what happened with Lazarus. And that was what he was telling Martha in this conversation, that Jesus has something new and different, unexpected. Jesus may not meet your expectations, less than, but it's very possible that Jesus will exceed your expectations. And so as you think about this, I say thanks so much for subscribing. And of course, hit the notification bell. Keep you posted when we put up new content. But think about this question. Answer this for me. How has Jesus exceeded your expectations? What's an experience where Jesus went beyond what you asked or thought or prayed for? What would that, think about when that happened in your life and describe that for me just briefly. So here's your joke at the end. Really funny, kind of, but not really. I accidentally drank a bottle of invisible ink last night. I'm in the hospital now, waiting to be seen. I know, so stupid, but next week will be way, way better. Thanks.